Minimalism doesn't start in your closet. It starts in your nervous system. Because most people don't actually want fewer things. They want fewer panic spikes when the credit card statement hits. They want fewer 2 a.m. thoughts about rent. They want fewer silent comparisons with friends who seem to be ahead. They want to stop feeling like their life is one unexpected expense away from collapse. But instead of solving the stress, we buy something small, something new, something that makes us feel temporarily in control. And that's the trap. Minimalism isn't about owning less. It's about stressing less about money. And those are two very different goals. My name is Aiden, and today I want to talk about what minimalism really fixes and what it doesn't.
The illusion of more. There's a reason buying things feels good. When you purchase something, a new phone, new shoes, a new desk setup, your brain releases dopamine, not because you needed it, not because it improves your life long term, but because novelty signals progress. Your brain interprets new as moving forward. That's powerful, especially in a culture like the United States where progress is measured in upgrades. New apartment, new car, new wardrobe, new side hustle, new lifestyle. And if your life doesn't look upgraded every year, you start to feel behind. So you compensate. You don't feel secure? Upgrade your image. You don't feel successful? Upgrade your tech. You don't feel confident? Upgrade your wardrobe. But here's the psychological twist. The object rarely solves the emotion. It just distracts you from it. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called the hedonic treadmill. It describes how humans quickly return to a baseline level of happiness after positive or negative events. You get the raise, it feels amazing. 3 months later, it's normal. You buy the new couch, it looks perfect. 6 weeks later, it's furniture. Your baseline resets, but the payment stays. So now you're not just back to normal, you're back to normal with higher monthly expenses. And that's where stress quietly enters the room. Because every item you own has a hidden cost: maintenance, storage, insurance, upgrades, time, mental bandwidth. We don't just own things. Things own space in our minds. Every subscription is a tiny background tab open in your brain. Every payment plan is a low-grade stress signal. Every buy now, pay later is future anxiety on layaway. This is why minimalism resonates so deeply with people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Not because they suddenly hate stuff, but because they're tired. Tired of the invisible pressure. Tired of lifestyle inflation. Tired of working harder just to sustain normal. Minimalism, at its core, isn't aesthetic. It's financial oxygen. It's the decision to stop expanding your lifestyle every time your income grows. Because the real flex isn't owning more, it's needing less. And the moment your lifestyle costs less than you earn, consistently, something changes, psychologically. You breathe differently. You sleep differently. You negotiate differently. You walk into work differently. Because now you have margin. And margin is power. But here's the deeper layer most people miss. Minimalism isn't about deprivation. It's about strategic subtraction. And that shift changes everything. The anxiety tax. There's a hidden tax most people pay. It's not on your paycheck. It's not in your bank statement. It's in your nervous system. Call it the anxiety tax. Every financial obligation you take on, every subscription, every financed upgrade, every lifestyle commitment adds a tiny weight to your future. Individually, they feel manageable. $18 for streaming, $65 for the gym you barely go to, $540 car payment, $1,900 rent for the nicer place, a phone you're still paying off. None of these seem catastrophic, but stacked together, they create fragility. And fragility is what makes money stressful. Because stress doesn't come from spending, it comes from lack of flexibility. Imagine two people making the same $85,000 a year in a city like Austin. Person A has a high-rent apartment, car payment, maxed-out lifestyle, and no emergency fund. Person B lives slightly below their means, drives a paid-off car, and has 6 months of expenses saved. Same income, completely different psychology. Person A checks their bank account daily. Person B checks it occasionally. Person A can't imagine quitting a toxic job. Person B could survive a layoff. Minimalism isn't about empty rooms. It's about lowering your fixed cost of survival. Because when your survival cost is high, your fear is high. And fear quietly controls your decisions. You stay in relationships longer than you should. You tolerate work environments that drain you. You say yes to things that exhaust you. Why? Because your life is expensive, and expensive lives demand compliance. There's a powerful concept in economics called optionality. The more options you have, the more leverage you have. The fewer options you have, the more trapped you feel. Minimalism increases optionality, not because you owned 30 items, but because your monthly burn rate is low. And when your monthly burn rate is low, time becomes your ally. You can wait. You can think. You can choose. That's psychologically stabilizing. Most people think wealth equals luxury, but psychologically, wealth equals space. Space to think, space to rest, space to pivot, space to say no. And here's the paradox. The more you chase visible wealth, nicer clothes, trendier tech, upgraded aesthetics, the more invisible pressure you create. Because now you must maintain the image. You must fund the narrative. You must keep earning at that level. Minimalism quietly removes that pressure. It says, what if your life didn't require constant performance? What if your identity wasn't tied to upgrades? What if your baseline was calm? That's not about owning less. That's about needing less to feel okay. And when you need less to feel okay, money stops being an emergency. It becomes a tool.
The identity shift. Here's where minimalism becomes uncomfortable, because at some point it stops being about money and starts being about identity. Most of us don't buy things for utility. We buy them for signaling, not necessarily to impress strangers, but to reassure ourselves. The right clothes say, I'm doing well. The right apartment says, I've made it. The right car says, I'm not behind. In a city like Los Angeles or New York City, signaling is almost invisible because everyone's doing it. You upgrade because everyone upgrades. You stretch because everyone stretches. You normalize financial pressure because everyone seems to be carrying it. But here's the psychological problem. If your identity depends on maintaining a certain lifestyle, then your peace depends on maintaining that income. And income is fragile. Layoffs happen, industries shift, health changes, markets crash. When your self-worth is tied to what you can afford, your stability becomes external. Minimalism challenges that. It asks a radical question. Who are you without the upgrades, without the brand, without the constant aesthetic improvements, without the proof? That's threatening, because consumption gives us a quick answer to who am I? But internal stability takes longer. There's a mental model I like to call identity inflation. As your income rises, your identity inflates with it. You're no longer someone who can afford certain things. You're someone who must maintain them. That's when lifestyle becomes obligation, and obligation becomes anxiety. Minimalism reverses identity inflation. It shrinks your ego's dependency on external signals. You stop asking, "What does this say about me?" and start asking, "Does this reduce or increase my stress?" That shift sounds small. It's massive. Because once stress becomes your filter, your decisions change. You pause before upgrading your apartment. You reconsider financing the car. You unsubscribe from services you forgot you had. Not because you're anti-money, but because you value psychological stability more than image. And something strange happens when you do that. You don't feel deprived. You feel lighter. There's less to manage, less to ensure, less to compare, less to prove. And that lightness? It's not about white walls and empty shelves. It's about reduced cognitive load. Your brain isn't tracking as many payments. Your calendar isn't filled with maintenance tasks. Your income doesn't have 40 destinations before it hits savings. Minimalism simplifies your financial story. And a simple story is easier to live. But here's the final twist. Minimalism doesn't mean you stop wanting more. It means you get intentional about what more actually is. Because maybe more isn't objects. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's flexibility. Maybe it's calm. And that's where everything comes together.
What enough really means. There's a moment that changes everything. It's not when you throw away half your wardrobe. It's not when your apartment looks like a design magazine. It's not when you fit all your belongings into a backpack. It's when you realize you don't need your life to look expensive to feel secure. Because security doesn't come from aesthetics. It comes from margin. Margin in your bank account, margin in your calendar, margin in your mental space. Minimalism is simply the practice of protecting that margin. And here's the part nobody talks about. When your expenses are low, your confidence goes up. You negotiate salaries differently. You take creative risks. You leave situations that drain you. You say no without panic. Not because you're rich, but because you're resilient. There's a difference. A high-income lifestyle can collapse overnight. A low-expense lifestyle is surprisingly durable. That's why some of the calmest people financially aren't the ones making the most. They're the ones who defined enough. And in America especially, that's rebellious. Because the system runs on escalation. Bigger house, newer car, better neighborhood, faster everything. But what if the real power move is opting out of escalation? What if instead of asking, "How do I afford more?" you asked, "How little do I need to feel free?" That question changes your trajectory. Because once your needs are modest and your savings are steady, money stops controlling your emotions. You stop checking your balance with dread. You stop equating worth with spending. You stop inflating your life every time your income rises. And something subtle happens. You start using money strategically. You invest. You build emergency funds. You buy things intentionally and enjoy them more. Because now, purchases aren't coping mechanisms. They're choices. Minimalism isn't about rejecting wealth. It's about redefining it. Wealth is not the car. It's the ability to walk away. Wealth is not the apartment. It's the flexibility to move. Wealth is not the watch. It's the absence of financial fear. Owning less is just a byproduct. Stressing less about money, that's the point. So maybe the real question isn't, how do I declutter my home? It's, what in my life is inflating my stress? If this shifted how you think about minimalism, if it made you rethink what enough means, then this conversation is just getting started. You can like, subscribe, and share if you want more deep dives like this. But more importantly, take a quiet moment today and define your version of enough. Because once you do, You stop chasing upgrades and start building freedom.